Hello, Matt. Who is the character in your icon? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're talking on mute.
It's Mashimoto from Speed Racer. It's an old, very, very old comic, and he's like driving an old roadster. And that's why the M, and
I see.
How are you doing?
Okay, I'm good.
I'm putting some things into the agenda and notes and confirming someone's joining us that I think is joining us.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, tag leads.
Good afternoon.
Where you are, Raffaele?
Where I am?
Yeah.
Currently, I'm in Italy.
Okay.
I'm visiting my parents.
Oh, I see. That's why I see messages from you 2 a.m. from my time.
Where are you? West Coast?
Texas, Austin, Texas.
Yeah, going back to Cleveland this at the end of the week.
Okay. Which part of Italy?
If you know Bologna, I'm very close to it.
Okay. Bologna in the middle, right?
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same latitude as Florence. Maybe Florence is more well known.
Very nice. Hey, Ted.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Hi, Ted.
Hi.
Let me put here the notes for the meeting. I have a feeling that we're gonna have a small crowd today.
Yeah, I had thought Alalita and maybe Chris were going to join, but I've never seen a tag meeting start right on time. It's always 5 minutes, 6 minutes later because everyone's busy.
Great. That was me. Yeah, with the full transparency with the tag reboot, we're still working through processes and getting familiar with all those. Right. Hi, Carol.
Hi, everyone.
So wait one more minute, then we're going to start. This is all being recorded, by the way. People can watching it can skip the 5 minutes in. I'll be the host today. If some of the leads can take the raw notes and help me out.
Yeah, I could help. I will try to do the log into the notes to take.
Yeah, I've been filling out a couple of things for the agenda later as well.
Great. All right, let's get started. So first of all, thank you for joining. I'm Rafa Brito. I'm gonna be the host today. I'm one of the co-chairs. The other co-chairs, one is Sion, is busy with the KubeCon India that's happening right now. and Mario is on PTO. Very quick. I work with Storage, is a optimization platform for Kubernetes, and I've been involved with the CNCF for a couple years doing KCDs, and I run the Austin community group here in Austin, Texas. Let's go for a quick round of intro. Raffaele, you want to do next?
Yeah, my name is Raffaele Spazzoli. I work for that. I've been and I was in the tag storage, mainly looking after the disaster recovery part of the storage topics that we were covering. And yeah, personally, I am interested in that area. I'm also interested in the full stack, and I've done a little bit of internal developer platform design and development. But in general, for Red Hat, I follow OpenShift and everything related to OpenShift, which, as you know, is our Kubernetes distribution.
Very cool, Carol. You want to go next?
Yeah, here, Carol Valencia. I live in Brazil. I do some KCDs in Sao Paulo, also in Peru. And I work with observability and Kubernetes a few years ago. So nice to meet you, everyone.
Nice to have you, Carol. Matt, you want to go next?
Yep. Hi, I'm Matt. I'll be quick. I'll be talking about initiatives later, and I think Ted and I back in December went along with Alalita in Tag Observability, when Ted recapped sort of the future of the state of the observability project and his thoughts on the future for it. One of the things we had talked about was how to build community and how to market to it and how to do outreach, technical outreach in our modern world with other humans, at least to start with. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that later too, I hope.
Very cool. Last but not least, our guest of honor, Ted.
Yeah, community outreach. It turns out TikTok dances are where it's at. So we need to come up with the operational resilience dance. Just get it out there, and then we'll have users. Yeah, I'm Ted Young. I'm one of the co-founders of the OpenTelemetry project. I work at Grafana Labs these days. Fun fact, before OTel, I worked on like container scheduling systems, Cloud Foundry in particular, but I founded the CSI, the Container Storage Initiative, as part of that work ages ago. So that was my first CNCF project. But I'm here today to talk about this. Some people call it a fad, but these things called browsers, they're like an experimental technology. Some people don't think it'll last, but we think there might be something to this World Wide Web. So on the OTel side, we decided why not get ahead of the curve and try instrumenting these so-called browsers before they get popular. So that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Awesome. All right, the on the screen there's the agenda to be discussed. The first one is just more an FYI to everyone here and everyone watching the recording. We do have one KubeCon session to talk about the tag operational resilience. We want to engage, activate the community to help us, and we cover so much ground that hopefully we have a nice list of initiatives and have everybody joining. If you double click here, I think it's on Wednesday, yeah, 5:30, and we added most of the leads. We had a ceiling of 5 people. Very good. Raffaele, do you mind if I give the floor to Ted first?
Oh, hit refresh.
He's our
as
guest
well.
of honor.
Cool.
I'll take
Yeah,
this
okay,
as a
sorry, I
yes.
was on mute. I said yes. Yeah.
Okay, all right, Ted. The floor is all yours.
Sure. So Matt asked me to join the tag just to I guess give an update about the new browser SIG. Um, I don't know, Matt, was there anything in particular you
Uh,
wanted me to focus on?
well, yeah, sure. So I the algorithms worked and the right events have been delivered to me. And so what was one of the things that was on my radar was the live stream that you guys did last week, kind of kicking off um, what I hope, well, what was purported to be the first um, of an open kind of discussion around what exactly you all are getting at. You established some vocabulary and context for those not familiar. I mean, we should keep in mind that many practitioners that are joining the cloud native ecosystems, like the last few years was when they graduated from college, and that's where life kind of and the user experience started. Right. So there's a lot of things that are taken for granted when it comes to actually understanding how what people are creating that's running in browsers, the experience is actually working. And so I was excited to see this, a number of years ago. I and some of my team collaborated with someone at Google to do some tracing browser side as well as metrics collection. And it was super clunky and a science experiment, and all kinds of things were not in place to make it viable or feasible at any kind of production ready way. And so now I was thrilled to see this browser SIG launching, and I thought it was something that here in the tag, which we're also launching, this is our second community meeting after the whole tag reshuffle. So we're all doing this for the first time together. And I think we have an opportunity to kind of highlight things. I would love to see, for example, a quarterly OpenTelemetry SIG lightning round of cool updates, where 3 or more SIGs come and just like say something that they delivered or something that, you want to put out into the community space, and in terms of outreach and growing our brand new, tag member base, which we have to go out and reach out to, not just from the tags like observability and sustainability that comprise our new tag, but all the other people now that are in scope too. So there's a lot of initiatives happening, and so this is a space I think where the right set of eyeballs can be reached by updates from what is one of the largest open source projects in the world, and certainly within the scope of our tag. Right. So I'm hoping that Ted, you could lead here by just kind of recap and provide some of the context that I saw in that live stream that talks about the kinds of things that the browser SIG will be doing. I really also like how the current effort is explicitly marked out and scoped with a first phase and a second phase, right? That is deliberate and is a consent. It's clear from the reading that when I read it, it appears to be a consensus-based approach among the willing who, are positioned to actually bring this to the cloud native ecosystem in a serious way, informed by all of this work that's come over the last 5 to 10 years. And how do we observe things in the browser? So that's kind of where I come from to think this is something we should highlight. And since this is, but in sort of a meta way, it's a brand new SIG, so you're not coming with updates of things that they have already been accomplished. So I kind of also just like the construction of, okay, we're going to kick off this series of updates from OpenTelemetry SIGs. And Ted, maybe you could, Alalita was going to join too, but I'm not sure. You could just folks might not understand the scope of like what it means, like the OTel SIGs, the OpenTelemetry special interest groups. It's actually a big list, right? With a whole lot of industry collaborating today, right? So I'll stop there because that's probably stealing of thunder. But yeah, that was my intention here to invite
Awesome.
Ted. And so with that, I'd love to listen.
That's some super helpful scoping. Okay, so OpenTelemetry, huge project, and we're actually in a transition right now on the governance committee. Something I've been committed to for a long time is improving our project management. OpenTelemetry was able to kind of get by with a sort of minimal amount of project management. So just so people understand, OpenTelemetry is like a couple of different projects, like it's the telemetry toolchain, right? So it's everything, it's all forms of telemetry and everything you need to construct and emit it. The core of OpenTelemetry is actually the data model. So it's the semantic conventions and the structure of our data is kind of, OTLP is kind of like our reference implementation protocol. So that's the structure of our data, but then also we have semantic conventions, which define the meaning of the data. So an HTTP request is always an HTTP request, no matter where it's emitted. It's very, very regular. This is actually the secret sauce to OTel. It's so boring, but no observability community has actually done that layer of work. Like they actually looked at it in Prometheus. It's interesting. And then at the time we're like, like that's a step too far. And now we're looking at that and everyone's looking at the semantic conventions and they're realizing one, when all of the data is integrated, it really helps to have it regularized. But also now that we're trying to leverage a lot more, machine learning and AI and other kinds of like forms of automated analysis, it's garbage in, garbage out with when it comes to finding correlations or doing any kind of like automated analysis. If the data is very, very strictly regular, you're going to get much more out of those tools. So we actually see that as like the heart of OpenTelemetry. And then everything else we're giving people is essentially a convenient reference implementation to like produce all of this information in all of the different SIGs and a way to transmit that information to a backend, which is the collector project. But then we do not get involved in the backends at all because that's where we see the standardization effort as ending. We want to standardize how systems describe what they're doing, and we want to provide a set of like standard tooling for like emitting that stuff. But when it comes to analyzing that data, we see that as kind of like a greenfield opportunity. That's where we want everyone to be competing with each other and making money and coming up with like novel, innovative ways of doing it. So that's kind of like the general structure of the project. We provide the telemetry, and all of the different member organizations are either end users that consume it or they're vendors who are trying to sell an analysis tool based on that data. And that clean separation of concerns has like really worked well for our community, to have it very clear why we are collaborating within the CNCF on the telemetry, while also like how is everyone expected to like get business value out of OTel. So all of that, it might be shocking to discover like we have been very light on like the client stuff. So like clients are hugely important. You could argue the most valuable telemetry in the world comes out of the clients because that's where the user is. That's what the user is literally doing. So that's the information we really want. When we care about latency, right? We care the most about perceived latency of the user. That's the latency that matters, is the latency they're perceiving. So we really want this data. But a reason why we haven't tackled it until recently was because we were really busy trying to get tracing metrics and logs out the door on the server. And that was like a big enough mandate that we really couldn't like deviate from it. And when we looked at clients like Android, iOS, and browser, we actually saw a different model of computation. It's a different enough model from what's happening on the server that you have to rethink it a bit. There's some additional concerns there that we don't have on the server. For one, things like sessions and session management, the idea that the resources available to the application might change over time, the idea that all of the information coming out of this process is related to one user as opposed to a whole bunch of very independent transactions is like a very different model. And the fact that clients like browsers, iOS, Android, they tend to be much more event oriented and not trace oriented. They tend to have a kind of reactor pattern, right? Whereas there's this spinning reactor, and then there's all these inputs coming in from various places that are triggering these like cascades of events. It's just different enough that we couldn't tackle that at the same time we were trying to put a bow on what we were initially trying to ship to the servers. So we punted. We had a browser SIG kind of look at this a couple of years ago, and they sort of stuck around and kind of babied it. But we all acknowledged that like we couldn't really focus on it until we had finished shipping logs and everything else. Now that we're done with that, we want to get a lot more project management going for OpenTelemetry because we no longer have this mandate of like, let's just hit traces, metrics, and logs, get those stable, get those out there. We've done that. So now it's like, well, now what? And the community's got a million ideas about what they'd like to do next. So we need to get some more project management going on the OTel side where we can make it clear to our community, like what our priorities are, where we're going, how we're rolling these initiatives out across the languages. So I've been doing a lot of work on that. And one of the big takeaways is we tend to start these like forever SIGs. A SIG is a special interest group, right? But it's like you have some topic like security or browser or developer experience or whatever it is. Like you have a topic, and so we start a SIG for people who are interested in that topic, and then it just kind of goes and does stuff. We're trying to change that to get a little more focused on like projects that are very specifically scoped. So when someone wants to start a project now, we have a whole templated form essentially for people to fill out, and they get added to the community repo. And that includes like who's going to lead the project? What are the goals of the project? What are the deliverables of this project? Who's signing up to do the engineering work? Not just to design this and put it in the spec, but who's actually going to roll this out? Like who's committing to do everything? And what is a guess at the timeline that we think it's going to take, ideally, to get it all done? And we're really trying to say projects going forwards now need to be kind of scoped more like this. And the browser SIG is actually like our kind of like, trial balloon. So rather than just spinning up a browser SIG, and it's like, what's the goal of the SIG? To sit around forever and do everything related to the browser was just way too open-ended a mandate. Because when you look at browser, there's all the instrumentation we need to write. There's the JavaScript API, which is kind of heavyweight because it was made with Node in mind. But when you want to run it in the browser, like the actual package size of the API is like it's measured in kilobytes, but it's still heavyweight enough that like it's not up to par with what existing proprietary solutions would offer. Same thing with the SDK. It's a little heavy. Our protocol for talking is OTLP. OTLP relies heavily on compression. OTLP is not necessarily optimized for sending data over really bad, untrusted network connections in public, right? The collector is not designed to be a public gateway that you would just like open a port on the public internet to receive this data, right? So there's like this whole stack of stuff when you start to say we're going to do browser best in show, the best thing out there. We want it to be top shelf. There's a whole set of stuff that has to get done. And so we decided we needed to pick an order of operations here. We couldn't try to tackle all of this at once because that would be kind of incoherent. So what order can we tackle this that provides the most value first? And we had a lot of community discussion about this. This wasn't something we wanted to push. So we heard from everyone who was interested in getting involved. What order would we like to do this? And what we settled on is, you know what? We have an API. It works in the browser. It's too heavy, but it does work. We have an SDK. It works in the browser. It's too heavy, but it does work. We have a protocol. It's not beacon. It doesn't handle a lot of edge cases. It's far from perfect, but it does work. What we don't have is semantic conventions and high quality instrumentation for the browser itself, core libraries, data modeling concerns around sessions and session management. These are things we actually don't have, or we have a very like old beta rudimentary thing that isn't actually what we want and what we want to revisit.
So
we decided phase one would be to focus on that for starters. So I saw you had a question, Matt.
No, I was going to say to who I put a link in the chat to the phase one that you're talking to, and share a screen, or you could share a screen, or I don't know, whoever's running.
Oh yeah, go ahead and share your screen if you don't mind.
I have a zillion windows. Do you want to get it?
Burp. Let me see here. Yeah, I can bring this up. So
I've been putting a lot of links in the notes as well to some of the things that Ted's been speaking to for.
Okay. So here you can see our proposal. And we really tried to break it down. Since the SIG started, we actually reorganized this a little bit. We initially said we want the API to be first. And we changed our mind about that. And so I'm about to update this, but you can look at our project board. This is kind of how we're trying to leverage GitHub to make this stuff a little more viewable. So in our project board here, we have a new roadmap feature that GitHub is offering for projects. So we've broken this down into work streams. We have like active, we're calling them projects, as reusing this word. So this is all kind of a work in process, but basically we have these work streams. So we decided first we wanted to focus on semantic conventions, then getting all of our sessions and all of that stuff sorted out. And then we want to write instrumentation. So I close this so you can see like this is where we're at right now. This is the work we have in flight. In the future, we hope next quarter to get to revamping the API. And once we're done with that, then the SIG will reassess. We'll be done with our current SIG's charter, and we'll reassess. What do we want to tackle next? Do we want to work more on instrumentation, more in the API? Do we want to revamp the SDK? Do we want to work on a new mobile protocol? Do we want to work on operationalizing the collector as a public gateway? There's a lot of different directions we can go. We're just not going to worry about that right now. We just want to get through this initial set of work. And so for our active work streams, we've broken this down. So here you can see the same way on this project roadmap. We have semantic conventions, sessions, and instrumentation. Here in our task picker, semantic conventions, sessions, instrumentation. We're kind of loading up first on semantic conventions. So these are all the conventions we want to get through. These are the ones that are active. These are the ones available to get picked up. So we're going to try to get these assigned to people this week.
So do you have an overarching document or some, for those that are involved in OpenTelemetry already, like a lot of these tasks and work items make sense, but even when you're adding like a span here, a span there, changing this to that. So how are you tracking sort of those sorts of goals, like,
right. So the overarching document is this project file. This is where we think we want to keep this. The advantage of these project files is they are files in the community repo, so anyone can update them by making a pull request. But it also means when a SIG changes what it's up to, there's like a bit of public visibility, right? Because it has to get merged by a GC member. So that might be annoying, but we're hoping that's like maybe a good medium of like the SIGs can manage themselves. Like we can just kind of rubber stamp approvals generally, but if something crazy happens, like it is an opportunity for a GC member to note that a SIG maybe totally changed what it was up to, and we need to revisit that in terms of like TC involvement or something like that.
Yeah, maybe you could GCTC define those for folks. Again,
great.
a lot of it is my hope, and by the numbers from our last meeting, many more people will watch this than are here today.
Great. Sure. So the way OpenTelemetry works as a project is a kind of hub and spoke model. So we have the governance committee, which is an elected body, and they are in charge of running the project. So you could think of the governance committee as like the project or product managers for OpenTelemetry. And we're elected by the community, and we design our charter, the technical committee's charter, and kind of everything else. The technical committee is assigned by the GC, and they are a group of technical experts who are in charge of designing OpenTelemetry. So their primary goal is maintaining the OpenTelemetry specification, because OpenTelemetry has a lot of implementations and a lot of different languages. The way we try to keep all of that organized is we write a spec, and then all of the different implementations in different languages implement the spec. And then we all come together as a community to work on the spec. So that's kind of like our hub and spoke model. And then we also have some additional stuff that isn't quite in the spec. So the collector is a big project that's not in the spec. We also have stuff like eBPF profiling, OB, which was just donated to OTel from Grafana Labs. Used to be called Bela. Now it's part of OpenTelemetry. It's called OB. So these are things that are not in the spec because they're kind of one-off implementations, but it's still the TC's job to kind of review these donations when they come in and generally be the people who kind of have, from a technical standpoint, the whole project kind of loaded up in their head. Then we have various special interest groups. Some of them work on the spec, right? So designing new features to be rolled out. Some of them work on maintaining language implementations. Some of them work on the collector, eBPF, stuff like that. And then we have some community SIGs as well. So the end user SIG, developer experience SIG, security SIG is kind of a community SIG because we're looking at security from like a project standpoint, things like that. So that's like the general overview. And so the browser is like a new implementation SIG, but because we also have to do a bunch of design work to figure out how to bring OTel to this new environment, it's also something of a specification SIG as well, which is why we're trying to tackle it through this model of this project-based model. And we're hoping in general for new work in OTel to kind of follow this model, where we can keep these projects scoped a little bit smaller and then have like an overall project backlog, which I can show you here. So we go to projects. Right. So here's what we're working on the GC, for keeping track of all of the organization-wide projects, right? So this is everything that we're currently working on, everything we have a project file for, right? So sampling, CI/CD, system semantic conventions, client instrumentation. This is like the parent group that browser is underneath that also includes Android and iOS. HTTP semantic conventions, adding new configuration file, right? We just finally came up with a configuration file format for all of our SDKs we need to roll out. Developer experience, like what's it like to be a developer working on OTel? Here's browser instrumentation, right? We can see this one just kicked off. So we're hoping to build this out as a way for things like this tag, for example, and end users and other people to be able to come in and maybe get a sense of where OpenTelemetry is going. And the more that these things can have expected end dates, the more we can start having like future projects starting to line up. And the more we can keep track of like how much bandwidth do we actually have available. One of the things that motivated us starting this was realizing we were overcommitting the TC and other core maintainers, and we were trying to run too many projects at the same time. And so everything was going kind of slow. OpenTelemetry has a reputation of being kind of a slow project. I actually think what the
Not
issue
slow,
is
Ted. Driven by
yeah,
consensus.
we're driven, but well, the way I describe it when you look at us is we're actually like a throughput oriented.
Yes.
We're high throughput, high latency. And part of the high latency comes from the fact some of it is like consensus driven and, not wanting to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But some of it is because we're actually overcommitted. And it's just like context switching. You have kind of like max threads. And once you've exceeded max threads on your CPU, right? Now you're trying to like context switch between these tasks. And every
Yes.
time you switch context, you have to load up new information and dump the old information. And so it turns out like if you have the same people working on 8 things, 12 things, 20 things, each one of those things is going to start to slow down as those people's attention gets
Yeah.
spread too thin. So this is the other thing we've recognized at OTEL is we actually have a kind of OTEL max threads of some form where we can only commit TC members and other core people to so many things. And projects that don't have TC or core people involved have like a low chance of success. So we actually want to say no to those projects. So a big part of standing all of this stuff up is getting us into a state where we can start to look at having more like a backlog of future projects we want to work on, our max number of in-flight projects, and being able to tell people, we can start your project once one of these projects are done. So what we'd like to see you do, if you want your project to move faster, what you need to do is grab a shovel and help us get one of these existing projects over the finish line, and then we can work on your project.
I think that's a
Until,
wonderful model to actually grow a community in a
yeah,
serious way.
It's a large community at that.
yes. But we have to be this organized in order to do that, because
Yeah.
otherwise, when you tell people no, right, it sounds like, well, why this project and not that project? Or
Right.
if not now, then when? And if you're not structured enough to let people see some kind of roadmap and like see how things are scoped and like how something might start next quarter if it's not starting now, then it's not gonna, it doesn't, it's very disheartening to tell people no if you can't tell them, if it's just no and we don't know when, that's not great, right? But if we can say not now, but next quarter, if we get done with this, that people can respond much more positively to hearing a plan like that than
Yeah.
just we're not
And
going to work on it right now.
yeah, and just to amplify what Ted is saying again, OpenTelemetry has a huge amount of activity, right? On a weekly basis, if you look at LFX Insights, we have more than 8,000 active contributors on the project and more than 1,768 organizations actively contributing, right? So it's a very, very large project and a lot of, stakeholders and contributors. So
Yeah.
to re-emphasize Ted's point, organization is key.
Yeah. Yep. So we're just like, just trying to kind of raise the bar for organization, and the browser SIG was kind of like, it's funny because it's like everything that was wrong with OTEL, whether it's like something missing from the spec or organizationally or not enough project management, it's like the browser SIG hit every single one of those problems along the way. So it's been like the tip of the spear. It's this thing that's like really important to us, but it's different enough from all of the prior work that we've done that it's like it caught all the bugs on the windshield trying to like drive this SIG forwards. So it really has been kind of like my trial balloon for a lot of this project management stuff I was just showing you. Like a lot of these things came out of like using the browser SIG as this poster child of something we want to start, but we don't want to start it right now. But how can we be confident that when we do start it, it will be able to get the attention it needs to solve all of the tricky spec problems it's gonna create when we try to tackle this new model of like browser client development.
Yeah. So if you load this link, in contrast, well, not in contrast, but along the same lines, the CNCF after this reboot has really restructured how all the tags this group that have assembled are going to work. And so they've, I've called it organized engineering in the past, right? We have initiatives, right? And so there are now, this is in recent weeks, there are now accepted initiatives. There were initially 4. One of them that we'll get to later with an update. And now they're starting to scale that up. And so once these initiatives launch, some of them that are going to require a lot more contribution and a bigger community are going to need to use these same approaches, right? So I'm really, really happy to see both GitHub finally having roadmaps.
Yeah.
Great. But it's really cool to see a working example in OpenTelemetry that where some of those learnings around how to project manage in the open, it's a working example to start from. So.
Yep. Lot of work from the GC and TC coming in here.
So just to put a bow on it and like tie it back to the browser SIG, and then I'll be done. Is so for the browser SIG, again, what we're trying to tackle here is instrumentation first. The first thing because at the end of the day, what matters most is the data and getting the data right and making sure that the data is useful. When people say RUM, they're talking about actually a huge product surface area, right? There's all kinds of things you might be trying to do when you say you're doing RUM, right? So we had to decide what subset of these like RUM products are we trying to do. And what we settled on is like, actually, you can observe clients the same way that you observe servers. There's a huge amount of stuff that comes out of clients that you could put into any kind of generic observability backend. You could put it into a generic tracing metrics logging, platform, and get a huge amount of value out of looking at it there. And of course, the traces are connected, right? Like your traces are originating in the browser, and we want to make sure that those work properly. So our initial model of the browser is just modeling it, from the perspective of like, what kind of dashboarding and alerting would you want to be doing as a kind of out of the box experience, treating these clients the same way you would kind of treat the servers, and really get that locked in so that the clients can join our existing kind of shared model of observability. And then maybe future projects are things more like session replay and like all of these other kind of like client specific observability tools that you don't see so much on the browser. But step 1, phase 1, get this basic model instrumented and semantic conventions done, and then look at optimizing the rest of that chain till it's best in class for that basic experience. Okay, that's my pitch. Thank you very much. Matt, you got your hand up?
Quick follow-up question about scoping for the browser SIG. Have you taken a position on WebAssembly? WASM running on the client browser side, and if there's any special attention given to that, as it's often, and I would expect will in the future more particularly in emerging spaces, be used as a componentization model and/or way to kind of have a polyglot stack running in the browser. And so it seems like a natural point of interest.
Right. So the thing about WASM is that is about taking things not written in JavaScript. The primary use case is about taking things not written in JavaScript and running them in the browser. We are focused on instrumenting JavaScript for the browser.
Okay,
how
so
you would
JavaScript model. Okay.
Right. When you're like, how do I, right? When we're talking about like library instrumentation and APIs, right? That's all JavaScript. Because as soon as you talk about, I have the C++ application and I'm going to compile that to WASM and run it in the browser.
I want to be super clear. I'm not talking about collecting all of the stuff from the collecting all of the signals from the code running in this way, which ultimately ends up as JavaScript, right? Through, I'm more talking about the metadata about like what is running in the browser. Like, here's this thing that was originally a .NET thing or got a Perl thing. I believe there's like there's a growing number, and if you can think it, it's probably already there. Ways to bring other things into the browser implemented in, and a lot of new stuff like in Rust. So I'm more talking about the metadata about what's happening.
Just in the interest of time, we
oh,
still
sorry,
have to
yeah.
get Raffaele.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just want to
short
answer
is
this
no.
and then yeah.
Yeah. Short answer is no. WASM is this whole other universe of stuff. So we're not. It doesn't seem like any decision we make here would be affected by that. So we're punting on it. Yeah.
This is pretty cool. This is pretty amazing. I hope to see you, Ted, at KubeCon North America.
I will be there.
And
we'll be
work
there.
together. Raffaele, wanna talk about the initiative / white paper?
Yeah, I had prepared some slides. Let me touch on both points, right? The initiative is to continue the journey that we started in tag storage and talk about how to do disaster recovery, right? How to handle disaster recovery strategies for cloud native applications for the end users that deploy cloud native applications, and potentially extend that to a more business continuity oriented approach, which in my opinion, in my view, includes also data protection. Okay. These were kept separate in the past. We had we have written some two white paper, version 1 and version 2. And today I wanted to give you just an overview of what is in version 2. So, and that would be just the start of the discussion on how we want to continue, right? If we want to continue. Okay, I think in 10 minutes I can only maybe show 1 or 2 slides, but I'm gonna do that. Do I have the ability to share? Oh yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna show this slide. In the white paper, we present 4 archetypes to do disaster recovery. These are the architectural approaches that we have seen. This list has been stable for a while. It could maybe it's not complete, but we haven't found any other architectural approach to DR. And so without making it too long, because I think you guys know what DR means, but DR is mostly about replicating state, right? So when you lose your data center or failure domain, you have the state somewhere else. We don't even talk in the white paper about DR for stateless workloads. It's really about the hard part of DR, right? So the state. And yes, there is a little bit of traffic management, right? You want to swing the traffic to the right location, but the hard part of DR is the state management. And you know that there is this ancient, at least in the wording, these ancient metrics to measure the efficiency of your DR process, which are RPO and RTO, right? Let me know if you don't know what they mean, but otherwise I just move on. So in this slide, I tried to summarize the entire paper here in one single slide, but essentially we list the approaches from the least efficient to worse in terms of metrics, in terms of this RPO and RTO, to the best, right? So we have these 4 approaches.
It's better to describe what's RPO and RTO for the sake.
Okay, so RTO, so these metrics, RTO stands for recovery time objectives, RPO stands for recovery point objective. What they really mean is at the point of the event that disrupts my data center, right, or the disaster, right, or how long does it take to recover the service? That is RTO. And RPO is how much data did I lose in terms of elapsed. So meaning if I lost 30 minutes of data, I lost all the transactions that happened in that 30 minutes before the event, right? So we want to keep RPO possibly around 0, not lose anything, and RTO as close to 0 as possible. And the narrative, like if you've ever talked to the business continuity team in a traditional enterprise, the narrative is always, we can give you any RPO and RTO that you want, dear application team, but the cost increases exponentially. I don't really believe in that narrative anymore after having analyzed these things and after having built some of these systems. And, I can build the one on the here, like on the right side, supposedly the best, all with open source software, right? So it's not expensive to build, and yes, it's a little bit more complex, but with declarative cloud native configuration, we can build a complex systems and we can actually handle them. So I think another thing that I wanted to do with the white paper is to change that narrative, is also to convince people that you can, dare a little bit more than what they do today. So from left to right, so backup and restore, I think everybody understands it, right? You take a backup and then when there is a disaster, you go with a restore. The dotted line here is intended to show what must exist always and what can be brought up just at the time of the disaster. These are supposed to be 2 or 3. Failure domain, for the sake of the discussion, let's identify these failure domains as data centers, or if running in the cloud, they could be availability zones. The other thing to keep in mind is disaster recovery is actually a very, very complex matter, but because there are 2 dimensions of complexity, there is you have 1,000 applications, not just one as shown here, right? And or more than 1,000, right? And you have dependencies between these applications. So some have to start before the others, or that to make the topic tractable, right? Here we talk simply about one application and the possible architectural approaches to DR, right? And then that the other level of complications are a little bit out of scope at this point. Okay, so then we have volume replication, which is where you use some storage mechanism to replicate the volumes between these availability zones. The replication can be synchronous or asynchronous depending on how far they are in terms of latency, right? And then, so you have a copy, whatever you write on this side, you have a copy on the other side, you can always restart the workload. And here, as an example, you see there is a database, but it could be any stateful workload. And there is the idea of a front end, right? Maybe a stateless front end. And then there is a global load balancer in front of it, in front of everything. The next is what we call transaction replication. So in this one, we're still, it's still an active passive scenario where only one can take writes. So only the left side can take the writes at any point in time. Only one side can take requests, but especially the writes requests. But, and in this case, it's the middleware that makes the replication, that takes care of replicating data. And so it works at a different level. It doesn't work at block level, storage block levels, of course, or typically, but it works at a logical transaction level. So there are here opportunities for optimization potentially. But so I'll make a distinction between the first 2 and the latter 2. In here, we rely on storage capabilities, which what it means in an organization is that there is a storage team, there's an infrastructure team that does storage. So essentially, when an application designs their disaster recovery procedure, the business continuity procedure, they will just turn around to the storage team and ask them, what can you give me, right? And then they will pick one of the options. Typically, there are a couple of tiers of the quality of service, but in reality, right, as a matter of fact, it is the storage team that determines the disaster recovery strategy for the entire company, right? Here, instead, we move to a place where it's the middleware that is configured to do the disaster recovery piece. We don't require anything from storage, right? These are just dumb volumes. And so it's the owner of the middleware, which could be the application team or could be a middleware team that now is in charge, is the real owner of the disaster recovery. So another message that we try to give here is perhaps it's time to shift left a little bit on who is the owner of the storage of the disaster recovery and move from the infrastructure team to the application team and let them choose what their disaster recovery strategy should be, right? And then we move to fully distributed workloads. These are the new generation of workloads that use consensus protocols and they sync the state, but any of them, any of the instances can take writes. So these are really active. So that's another distinction. All of the first three are active-passive approaches. The latter is active-active. The big difference is active-active approaches when you lose in a failure domain, the system reconfigures itself, but it doesn't stop, right? It doesn't stop serving. It autonomously recognizes the problem and reconfigure itself to continue. So the RPO is 0 and the RTO is essentially also 0. Maybe a few seconds for the health check of the global load balancer to understand that this needs to steer the traffic to the healthy sites. In these ones, instead, in the active-passive scenarios, the disaster recovery procedure is triggered by a human decision. Okay, so there is a human that makes the decision that there is a disaster is happening, and we need to trigger the procedure to start the workload on the other side and change the traffic, switch the traffic, and make the passive active. There are things that need to happen at the storage level, right, or here at the database level, which this needs to change from slave to master, and so on, right? So much more complicated to manage, and this is why these companies that have active passive scenarios, they do the dreaded annual disaster recovery exercise. I don't know if you have ever been in one of those situations, but this is how it works today in an enterprise. So another message here in the document is, if everything else being equal, we cannot recommend you to always use this one, right? Maybe you're not in a situation where you can, but everything else being equal, you should really choose this one, because this approach here treats a disaster essentially as an HA event, right, instead of a disaster. So you can sleep during the night, come back the day after, realize that you lost an availability zone, restart it.
Raffaele, just a time check. We are almost about time. There's a couple of options. We can continue this for the next community meeting, and perhaps we should. We can wrap up like a call action. What's the plan for this as on a tag perspective?
Yeah, I think it should be a community decision. I just would like to continue sending these messages that I've shared right now. And my idea was to look at what we have in the. So in the next slide, I was going to talk about the capabilities that we need to build this architecture. And the idea being, if you're building a platform, just enable this capability and let your developers choose what the DR procedure they want. Second concept is, do we have these capabilities in the CNCF landscape? And the answer is, sometimes, not always, right? So why don't we identify the gaps and perhaps see if anyone would like to spur initiatives to build new projects to fill these capabilities, or perhaps build some standardization around the capabilities. So you can have different projects, but the end users, they just have to think about, following the standard.
No, thank you. I think we should continue this topic next time. And the call to action at this point is activate the community for this discussion, because business continuity is part of our charter. And that's how we're going to engage end users, more corporate users. That's where my background is. And that's very important. And I don't think, top of my head, the CNCF has projects to cover all this, right? And then we have to produce something, right? Anything else before we close?
I think we're cut for time. There are updates on the various initiatives in flight in the notes for anyone interested.
Very good. I think this is gonna go to YouTube, and I hope to see you all next time. Thank you so much for the guests. Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.